I'll submit for the record. And I do have a couple of questions. And first of all, I'd preface those by saying, as I think we all had a chance to talk about, as you were both nice enough to visit the office, thanks for your service. Ms. Rosenworcel, thanks for your real understanding of these issues, all you've done for the committee. And Mr. Pai, thanks for your service in the Senate, even if it did include a substantial amount of time with my Chief of Staff, Glenn Chambers, as you worked for Senator Brownback. And I'm glad that you're both willing to be here today and willing to make yourself available for these important jobs. One of the challenges I think the FCC has faced and will continue to face, as the Congress also faces it, is this is a area that changes so quickly that I believe for a long time that the odds that you'll actually solve a problem while it's still the problem are pretty slim. And the odds that you'll create a greater problem by trying to solve a problem that's passed you by are greater than that. I remember when we did the Telecommunications Act when I was on the Commerce Committee in the House in the late 90s, I guess it was, when we did that, and then came back to that 5 years later. Nothing that we thought was important was still important. I remembered all the things we divided up on and all the debates we had and all the friction. None of it mattered any longer 5 years later. I also remember the many times I've asked my staff, what is the definition of net neutrality this month? Because it was a constantly moving target. And one of the issues that Senator Hutchinson brought to the floor recently was, let's look at the net neutrality position that the committee has, that the Commission has taken. And my view and the view of many others is that if you regulate too much here, you'll slow down the development of these services rather than speed them up. And as you slow them down, you'll make them more difficult and maybe even more expensive, not less expensive. And those are issues I hope you'll think about a lot. Mr. DeMint talked about one other topic, is that as commissioners, and my belief is you'll both become commissioners, the Commission's never been able to fully define at any place I've been with the Commission underserved and unserved. And there is a big difference. And there's a particular difference when somebody's come in and created a network with their own money, and then somebody in the government decides, well, the speed of that network isn't quite quick enough, so we're going to subsidize somebody to come in and compete. And I think we need to be extraordinarily careful with that. Assuming you both go on the Commission, I suspect one of the first questions I'll ask when we meet again is, what's the difference in unserved and underserved, and what are you doing about it? And I have a much different view of what the Congress should do for unserved areas of the country than I do ill-defined, underserved areas of the country. Now, for two quick questions. One is, I don't want you to comment on the proposed merger that has been out there for a while between AT&T and T-Mobile, but I was concerned when the Commission staff, I guess today, released their view of that merger, even though the merger request had been withdrawn. So I guess my question is, does the Commission speak through the Commission, or does it speak through the staff? And how do you view the actions of the Commission as a commissioner? And you may or may not say anything about the idea that staffers will either be directed to or just decide they're going to, on their own, announce their view of issues that may or may not be before the Commission. Mr. Pai, do you want to start?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. Obviously, the Chairman is the manager of the full agency, usually in consultation with other commissioners. And if I were fortunate to be on the Commission and consulted about a question like this, my recommendation to him, as it would be to the staff, would be simply to abide by the Commission's rules, to look at any past precedent, to make sure that whatever the Commission was proposing to do was consistent with those rules and with that practice.
And what if there's no Commission action pending? Should the Commission gratuitously put information out there?
That is, I haven't had an opportunity to explore the staff report you're referring to, or frankly, even news articles, since it just broke yesterday while I was meeting with a number of the members of the committee. But I will say that I view the Commission's discretion as one that should be exercised very carefully. And to the extent that the release of a staff report along those lines, in the context of a proceeding that doesn't currently exist, to the extent that aggravates people in the industry, people on the Hill, that's something that I would take into account.
And I believe, Ms. Rosenworcel, my question, by the time I got done with Mr. Pye, had two, but does the Commission act through its actions or through the staff?
I'd have a very hard time improving upon the answer from my colleague. I think that what occurred yesterday was the chairman who directs the agency chose to release that report. I believe it's within his statutory authority to do that, although I will acknowledge it is probably unprecedented.
My second question is, 30 years ago, when there was much less media than there is now, there was a doctrine called the Fairness Doctrine. I would be opposed to seeing that doctrine put back in place, and as commissioners, asking what your view would be on that. Mr. Pye?
Senator, I would share your view, and I believe Chairman Janikowski does as well. He recently took action to remove that regulation from the books, given that it had somehow stayed on the books for some time.
Yeah, Ms. Rosenworcel?
I do not support returning the Fairness Doctrine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Senator. Now we will have Senator Toomey to be followed by Senator Lautenberg.